My name is Robert Mitchell, but everyone calls me Bob. I'm 62 years old, and this Christmas Eve was supposed to be special. For the first time since my wife Martha passed 3 years ago, I was preparing her famous holiday dinner completely alone. My two sons, David and Michael, were coming over after months of strange distance between us. I had spent all morning cooking her recipes, setting 3 places at our old dining table, trying to recreate the warmth we used to have. But something felt different this year. The phone calls had been shorter, the visits less frequent, and there was a coldness in their voices I couldn't quite place. Little did I know this Christmas would change everything forever. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. Drop a comment and let me know what state or country you're tuning in from. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories that matter. Now let me tell you about the Christmas dinner that shattered my world. Looking back now, I should have seen the signs building for months. But when you love your children unconditionally, you make excuses for behavior that should raise red flags. I had spent 40 years working construction, most of those as a foreman for Henderson Building Company here in Ohio. I worked double shifts, weekends, holidays, anything to make sure David and Michael had opportunities I never had growing up. When David graduated high school, he wanted to study business at Ohio State. The tuition was steep, but I took on extra weekend jobs framing houses to cover it. 4 years later, Michael followed with computer science at the same university. By then, my back was screaming every morning, but seeing my boys walk across that graduation stage made every aching joint worth it. Both boys landed good jobs right out of college. David became an investment banker at a firm in Columbus, while Michael got hired as a software engineer at a tech startup. I was so proud when they bought their first houses, got married, started families. I had done what every father dreams of doing. I had given my children a better life than mine. When Martha got diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, the medical bills started piling up fast. Our insurance covered some treatments, but the experimental therapies that might save her life were expensive. Without hesitation, I took out a second mortgage on our house. The house I had been paying on for 25 years suddenly had new debt, but if it meant more time with Martha, every penny was worth it. We fought that cancer for 18 months. Martha was brave, stronger than any person should have to be. But in the end, the disease won. She passed away peacefully in our bedroom, holding my hand with David and Michael by her side. At her funeral, both boys promised they would take care of me, that family would always come first. That was 3 years ago. In those 3 years, I had slowly been paying down that second mortgage again. Living on my modest pension and Social Security, I managed my money carefully. I cooked simple meals, did my own home repairs, drove my old truck until the wheels nearly fell off. The house would be paid off completely in another 2 years, and I was proud of that accomplishment. But somewhere in the past 6 months, things started changing with my sons. David's visits became shorter, more formal. Instead of staying for Sunday dinner and watching football like we used to, he would stop by for an hour, check his phone constantly, and make excuses to leave early. Michael followed the same pattern. Their wives, who used to hug me and call me Dad, started greeting me with polite handshakes. The phone conversations changed too. Instead of asking about my health or sharing stories about the grandkids, they seemed focused on my finances. Were my bills getting too hard to manage? Was the house becoming too much work? Did I need help with anything? At first I thought they were being caring sons, but their questions felt more like interrogations. This Christmas Eve morning, as I pulled Martha's recipe box from the kitchen cabinet, I pushed those worries aside. Today would be different. Today we would remember what Christmas used to feel like when we were a real family. I spent hours preparing her famous glazed ham sweet potato casserole and green bean almondine. The house filled with familiar smells that brought back 25 years of happy holiday memories. I set the table with Martha's good china, the set we only used for special occasions. 3-place settings, cloth napkins, candles in the center. I even put on the Christmas music Martha loved, Bing Crosby crooning about white Christmases through the old radio in the kitchen. Around 4 o'clock, David called to confirm they were still coming for dinner. His voice sounded strained, almost businesslike. "Dad, we'll be there at 6. Michael and I need to discuss something important with you after dinner." "Of course, son. Is everything all right?" "We'll talk tonight, Dad. See you soon." The line went dead before I could ask any more questions. A knot formed in my stomach, but I told myself I was overthinking things. Maybe one of them got a promotion, or perhaps they were planning a surprise family vacation. I finished setting out the dinner rolls and waited for my boys to come home. At exactly 6 o'clock, I heard David's BMW pull into the driveway. Through the front window, I watched both my sons sit in the car for several minutes, having what looked like an intense conversation. David was gesturing with his hands, while Michael kept shaking his head. Finally, they got out and walked to my front door. Their hugs felt different. Where I used to get warm embraces that lasted several seconds tonight, I received quick, obligatory pats on the back. David was wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension check. Michael had on a new leather jacket I had never seen before. Both looked uncomfortable, like they were attending a business meeting rather than Christmas dinner with their father. "The house smells great, Dad," Michael said, but his smile seemed forced, just like Mom used to make it. We sat down at the dining table, and I served the meal I had been preparing all day. For the first few minutes, the conversation felt almost normal. I told them about Mrs. Henderson next door, how she had been battling pneumonia, but was finally recovering. I mentioned that the Johnsons down the street had just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. "That's nice, Dad," David said, cutting his ham with more force than necessary. "How are you managing financially these days? Everything still going okay with the bills?" It was an odd question to ask during Christmas dinner, but I answered honestly. "I'm doing fine, son. The pension covers my basic expenses, and I have a little Social Security coming in. I should have the house completely paid off within 2 years." David and Michael exchanged a look across the table that made my stomach tighten. It was the same look they used to give each other as teenagers when they were planning something they knew I wouldn't approve of. "Dad, we've been worried about you living here all alone," Michael said, setting down his fork. "This house is pretty big for one person. The upkeep must be getting expensive." I laughed, trying to lighten the mood. "Boys, I've been taking care of this house for 30 years. I can handle fixing a leaky faucet or cleaning the gutters. Your old man isn't ready for the nursing home yet." Neither son found my joke amusing. David leaned forward, his expression serious. "We're not talking about a nursing home, Dad. But you have to admit you're not getting any younger. What happens if you fall down those basement stairs? What if you have a medical emergency and nobody finds you for days?" "David, I'm 62, not 92. I'm in good health. I have neighbors who check on me, and I have both of your phone numbers. I appreciate your concern, but I'm managing just fine." Michael pulled out his phone and started scrolling through something, not making eye contact with me. "Dad, we've been looking into some really nice retirement communities in the area. Places where you could have your own apartment, but also have people around activities, medical care if you need it." The knot in my stomach was growing larger. This wasn't the Christmas conversation I had been expecting. "Boys, I don't need a retirement community. I need my home where your mother and I built our life together, where you two grew up." I'm not ready to give that up. David's voice took on a tone I had never heard before, cold and calculating. Dad, we need to talk about your financial situation more seriously. You keep saying you're managing fine, but are you really? How much do you have in savings? What happens if you need major medical care? What if the house needs a new roof or the furnace breaks down? I looked back and forth between my two sons, both successful men who I had sacrificed everything to educate and support. Why are you asking me these questions on Christmas? Can't we just enjoy dinner and talk about family things? Michael finally looked up from his phone. This is about family, Dad. We're worried about your future, and we think it's time to make some practical decisions while you're still healthy and able to participate in the planning. Something in his tone made my blood run cold. The way he said, "while you're still able to participate," sounded more like a threat than concern for my well-being. I had raised these boys to be respectful and loving, but the two men sitting at my Christmas table felt like strangers. What kind of decisions are we talking about? I asked, though I was beginning to jar of the answer. David wiped his mouth with his napkin and pushed his plate aside even though he had barely touched Martha's carefully prepared meal. Dad, we think it would be best for everyone if you sold this house and moved somewhere more appropriate for a man your age. Somewhere safer with people around to help if you need it. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Bing Crosby still singing softly from the kitchen radio. I stared at my sons, trying to process what I was hearing. They wanted me to sell the house where their mother and I had lived for 3 decades. The house where I had taught them to ride bicycles in the driveway, where we had celebrated every birthday and holiday, where Martha had taken her last breath. This house will be yours someday anyway, I said quietly. It's part of your inheritance. Why would you want me to sell it? Another look passed between them, and I realized with growing horror that this conversation had been planned long before they arrived at my dinner table tonight. David cleared his throat and straightened his tie, transforming into the businessman I barely recognized as my son. Dad, we need to be completely honest with you. Michael and I have been consulting with some professionals about your situation. What professionals? What situation? Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila folder. We've spoken with elder care attorneys and financial advisors. Everyone agrees that you're at a vulnerable age where major decisions should be made proactively, not reactively. I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare. Vulnerable boys, I pay my bills on time, I maintain my house, I drive safely, I manage my own health care. What exactly makes me vulnerable? David opened the folder and spread several documents across Martha's good tablecloth. We've done some research, Dad. The average cost of long-term care in Ohio is over $4,000 a month. If you need assisted living or nursing care, your pension won't cover it. The house is your only major asset, and if you wait until you're in crisis to sell it, you might not get fair market value. I stared at the papers scattered across my dinner table. There were printouts about retirement communities, financial planning worksheets, and what looked like real estate evaluations. How long have you been planning this? About 6 months, Michael admitted, not meeting my eyes. We started looking into options after you mentioned having trouble getting up on the ladder to clean the gutters last summer. 6 months. For 6 months, my sons had been meeting with lawyers and planners discussing my future without including me in the conversation. For 6 months, they had been treating me like I was already incompetent, already a burden that needed to be managed. Dad, we've already found a buyer for the house. David said, his voice taking on an excited tone that made me sick to my stomach. My friend Harper from the investment firm is willing to pay cash, close quickly, no inspections or complications. You could have the money in 30 days. The room started spinning. Not only had they planned this ambush for months, but they had already lined up a buyer. They had discussed selling my house, my home, the place where their mother died, with strangers, before they had even bothered to ask my opinion. "Harper," I managed to whisper. "You mean Harper Williams from your office?" "Yes, he's looking for investment properties in established neighborhoods. He's willing to pay $250,000, which is probably more than you'd get on the open market." I knew enough about real estate to know that my house in good condition, in a desirable neighborhood, was worth at least $300,000. Harper wasn't offering a fair price. He was offering a quick profit for himself and an easy solution for my sons. "Boys," I said, my voice shaking with emotion I was trying to control. "This house isn't just an asset to be liquidated. This is where you learned to walk, where we carved your heights into the doorframe every birthday, where your mother planned your weddings. This is our family home." Michael looked up from the papers, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the little boy I used to read bedtime stories to. But it disappeared quickly, replaced by cold calculation. "Dad, you're being emotional. We need to think practically. The money from selling the house could pay for your care in a nice facility for several years. You'd have social activities, meals prepared for you, medical staff available 24 hours a day." "I don't want social activities with strangers. I don't want institutional meals. I want to live in my own home, cook in my own kitchen, sleep in the bedroom I shared with your mother for 30 years. David's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Dad, you're 62 now. What happens when you're 72, 82? Do you really think you'll be able to maintain this house forever? Do you want to end up like old Mr. Peterson, dead in his living room for 3 days before anyone found him?" The cruelty of using our deceased neighbor as a scare tactic hit me like a physical blow. Mr. Peterson had no family who cared about him. I have 2 sons who are supposed to love me. "We do love you," Michael said, but his words felt hollow. "That's why we're trying to plan for your future before something bad happens." I looked at the documents spread across my table, really studying them for the first time. There were brochures for Sunset Manor, an expensive retirement community across town. There were financial projections showing how the money from my house sale would cover their fees. There were even floor plans of small apartments with tiny kitchens and no room for Martha's furniture. "You've thought of everything," I said bitterly. "Everything except asking what I want." David's face hardened. "Dad, sometimes families have to make difficult decisions. Sometimes love means doing what's best for someone, even if they don't understand it at the time. Like the decision I made to work 16-hour days to pay for your college. Like the decision to mortgage my house to pay for your mother's cancer treatment. Were those decisions I made without consulting you?" My sons looked uncomfortable for the first time since they had arrived. They hadn't expected me to fight back to point out the irony of their position. "That's different," Michael said weakly. "You were younger then, and those were your choices to make. And this is my choice to make now. I'm not selling my house. I'm not moving to a retirement home. I'm staying right here in the home I've worked my entire life to pay for." David stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Dad, you're not thinking clearly. We're not asking your permission. We're telling you what's going to happen. Harper is ready to make an offer tomorrow. We've already selected your apartment at Sunset Manor. The moving company can pack your things next week." I stared at my oldest son, the boy I had taught to throw a baseball, the young man whose college graduation had been one of the proudest days of my life. I didn't recognize the person standing in my dining room. "You can't force me to sell my house, David. It's my name on the deed, my decision to make." Michael pulled another document from the folder, this one with official-looking letterhead. Actually, Dad, we can. If we can demonstrate that you're no longer capable of making sound financial decisions, we can petition for conservatorship. A judge can give us legal authority to manage your affairs. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. My own sons were threatening to have me declared incompetent, to take away my basic rights as an adult human being, all so they could sell my house to their friend for below market value. On what grounds would you claim I'm incompetent? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. David sat back down and pulled out yet another folder. We've been documenting concerns for months, Dad. You've been forgetting things, making poor decisions, showing signs of confusion and disorientation. That's not true, isn't it? What about last month, when you couldn't find your car keys and accused Mrs. Henderson of moving them? What about the time you drove to the grocery store and forgot where you parked? What about paying the electric bill twice in 1 month? Each example was technically true, but completely normal for any person my age. Everyone misplaces keys occasionally. Everyone forgets where they parked sometimes. Everyone makes small mistakes with bills. But presented in a legal document, these everyday occurrences would sound like evidence of declining mental capacity. You've been spying on me, taking notes, building a case. We've been observing changes in your behavior that concern us, Michael said, trying to sound clinical and caring at the same time. I felt betrayed in a way I never could have imagined. My own children had been watching me, waiting for me to make normal human mistakes, then recording those mistakes as evidence to use against me. They had turned my everyday life into a legal case for their benefit. Why? I asked, my voice breaking. Why are you doing this to me? David and Michael looked at each other again, and something passed between them that excluded me completely. Finally, David spoke. Because we need the money, Dad. And we need it now, not in 20 years when you finally die. The silence that followed David's words was deafening. Even Bing Crosby had stopped singing from the kitchen. My own son had just told me on Christmas Eve that they needed me to hurry up and give them their inheritance because waiting for me to die naturally was taking too long. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking beneath me. Get out. Dad, you're overreacting, Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. Even he seemed shocked by David's bluntness. Get out of my house, both of you, right now. David remained seated, cool and collected. Dad, you're being unreasonable. We're your family. We're trying to help you make the best decision for everyone involved. Family. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Family doesn't plot behind each other's backs for months. Family doesn't threaten legal action to steal someone's home. Family doesn't tell their father they're tired of waiting for him to die. I walked to the front door and opened it wide, cold December air rushing into the warm house. I said, "Get out." Neither son moved. They sat at my dinner table surrounded by documents designed to destroy my independence, looking at me like I was an obstacle to be overcome rather than the father who had devoted his life to their success. Dad, sit down and let's discuss this rationally, David said. You're getting emotional, and that's exactly the kind of behavior that concerns us. The patronizing tone in his voice, the way he was already using my emotional reaction as evidence of my supposed incompetence, filled me with a rage I had never felt before. Do you want to know what's irrational? I said, my voice rising. Working 2 jobs for 20 years so you could go to college without student loans. Taking out a second mortgage at age 55 to pay for your mother's cancer treatment. Giving you both $10,000 each for down payments on your first house's money. I had been saving for my own retirement. Both sons looked uncomfortable as I recounted the sacrifices I had made for them. Do you want to know what else is irrational? believing that the children I raised to be decent human beings would grow up to be the kind of people who would threaten their own father with legal action on Christmas Eve. Dad, we never asked you to do those things, Michael said quietly. His words were like a knife to my heart. You never asked me. When you called crying about not being able to afford college, you never asked me when you needed help with your wedding expenses. You never asked me when your mother was dying and needed treatment our insurance wouldn't cover should I have let her suffer, because you never asked me to help. That's not what we meant, David said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. That's exactly what you meant. You took everything I had to give, and now that I need something from you, just basic respect and love, you can't provide it. Instead, you want to take the one thing I have left. I gestured around the living room filled with 30 years of family memories. This house isn't just real estate to me. It's where you took your first steps, where we celebrated every Christmas morning, where your mother and I danced in the kitchen after your graduations. It's where she died holding my hand telling me to take care of our boys. My voice broke on the last words, but I forced myself to continue. She made me promise to take care of you. But she never made you promise to take care of me, did she? Maybe she should have. Michael's face was flushed, and I could see tears forming in his eyes. But David remained stone-faced, unmoved by my emotional plea. Dad's sentiment doesn't pay for medical bills or long-term care. We're trying to be practical here. Practical. I walked back to the dinner table and picked up the real estate evaluation. You want to sell my house for $50,000 below market value to your friend. That's not practical. That's a gift to Harper at my expense. Harper is willing to close quickly and handle all the paperwork, David explained. That convenience is worth the slight reduction in price. Slight reduction. $50,000 is more than my annual income, David. That's 2 years of my pension you're willing to throw away for convenience. I picked up another document, the floor plan for the Sunset Manor apartment. And this place costs $3,500 a month. At that rate, even if I got full price for my house, the money would only last about 7 years. What happens after that? We'll figure something out, Michael said weakly. No, you'll figure something out. I'll be dead by then, which is apparently what you're hoping for anyway. David finally stood up, his composure cracking for the first time. That's not fair, Dad. We love you, and we want what's best for you. If you loved me, you wouldn't have spent 6 months plotting to steal my home. If you loved me, you would have included me in these conversations, instead of presenting me with a fait accompli on Christmas Eve. I walked over to the mantel, where Martha's picture sat next to photos of David and Michael at various stages of their lives. Birthday parties, Little League games, high school graduations, weddings. The happy family we used to be. Your mother would be ashamed of both of you right now. The words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, the same clock that had marked time through decades of family dinners, homework sessions, and bedtime stories. Then David picked up the folders and shoved the documents back inside. We're trying to help you, but you're too stubborn to see it. When you end up sick and alone with no money for care, don't blame us. I won't blame you, I said quietly. I'll be too busy wondering how I failed so completely as a father. Michael stood up and walked toward me, his hand extended like he wanted to touch my arm. Dad, please. Let's not end Christmas like this. Can't we work something out? For a moment, I wanted to forgive everything. I wanted to pull my younger son into a hug and pretend this conversation had never happened. But then I saw David in my peripheral vision, checking his expensive watch impatiently and I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding that could be resolved with apologies. There's nothing to work out, Michael. You've made your position clear. I'm an obstacle to your financial planning, and obstacles need to be removed. David moved toward the front door, then turned back to face me one final time. His expression was cold, businesslike, completely devoid of any filial affection. "You are no longer our family," he said with chilling finality. "We have moved past you." He paused at the threshold, his next words delivered like a legal verdict. "You can cooperate with our plan, or we'll pursue conservatorship through the courts. Either way, this house will be sold, and you'll be in managed care within 60 days. The only question is whether you want to participate in the process or be forced through it." David dropped a business card on the hall table. "That's Harper's number. He's expecting your call by January 2nd to finalize the sale. After that, we'll assume you're unable to handle your own affairs and proceed accordingly." Both sons walked out into the cold December night without another word, without looking back, without any acknowledgement that they had just destroyed their relationship with their father on Christmas Eve. I stood in my open doorway, watching David's expensive car disappear down the street, where he had once ridden his bicycle and played with neighborhood friends. The Christmas lights on the houses around me twinkled cheerfully, oblivious to the devastation that had just occurred in my dining room. I closed the door and turned back to look at my house. Martha's china still sat on the table, the food growing cold, the candles burned down to stubs. The Christmas tree lights blinked steadily in the corner, illuminating wrapped presents that would never be opened. For the first time since Martha died, I was truly alone. The weeks after Christmas passed in a haze of depression and disbelief. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't concentrate on anything except replaying that horrible conversation over and over in my mind. Had I really raised such heartless, greedy men? Where had I gone wrong as a father? I stopped answering the phone when David or Michael called. I stopped checking my mail, knowing it would only bring more legal documents and threats. I stopped taking care of myself, surviving on crackers and canned soup, wearing the same clothes for days at a time. It was my neighbor Gladys who saved me from complete self-destruction. She had been Martha's closest friend, a widow herself who understood the particular loneliness of losing a spouse after decades of marriage. When I hadn't picked up my newspaper for 3 days, she knocked on my door with a pot of homemade chicken soup and refused to leave until I let her in. "Bob Mitchell, you look like death warmed over," she said, bustling into my kitchen and immediately starting to clean up the mess I had made of dirty dishes and empty food cans. "What in heaven's name is going on over here?" At first I tried to brush off her concern, but Gladys was persistent. She had raised 5 children and buried 2 husbands. She could spot a man in crisis from a mile away. Finally, sitting at my kitchen table while she forced soup down my throat, I told her everything. Gladys listened without interruption, her weathered hands folded in her lap, her kind eyes growing sadder with each detail I shared. When I finished, she was quiet for several long minutes. "Bob," she finally said, "I need to tell you about my own experience with greedy relatives." For the next hour, Gladys shared her story. After her second husband died, his adult children from a previous marriage had tried to claim half of everything, even though they had been estranged from their father for years. They hired lawyers, contested the will, and made her life miserable for 2 years before finally giving up. "But the worst part," she said, "was my own nephew, my sister's boy, who I had helped raise after she died young. He convinced me to let him manage my finances, supposedly to help me in my old age. Within 6 months, he had emptied my savings account and taken out loans against my house." "How did you stop him?" "I got smarter than he was. I documented everything, hired my own lawyer, and fought back. But more importantly, I learned that blood doesn't always make family, and family doesn't always share blood. Her words resonated with something deep inside me. For the first time since Christmas, I felt a spark of anger instead of just despair. Why was I accepting defeat without a fight? The next morning, I showered, shaved, and put on my best suit. I drove downtown to the law offices of Patterson and Associates, the firm Martha and I had used for our wills and estate planning. Attorney Jim Patterson had been Martha's college roommate's son, and I trusted him more than any lawyer David and Michael might recommend. Jim listened to my story with growing concern and outrage. When I showed him the documents my sons had left behind, his expression grew grim. "Bob, this is elder abuse, plain and simple. They've been building a case based on completely normal behavior, and they're using scare tactics to pressure you into decisions that benefit them, not you. Can they really have me declared incompetent? It's possible, but highly unlikely based on what you've told me. You're clearly mentally sharp, financially responsible, and physically capable. Any judge would see through their manipulation." Jim spread out the papers on his desk, studying each document carefully. "But here's what concerns me most. They're not just trying to manage your affairs. They're trying to profit from them. This sale price to their friend Harper is significantly below market value, and the retirement community they've selected is unnecessarily expensive. So what can I do?" Jim smiled for the first time since I had entered his office. "Bob, you have more power than you realize. This is still your house, your money, your life. They can threaten all they want, but you don't have to cooperate with any of it." Over the next several days, Jim helped me understand my legal rights and options. More importantly, he helped me see that I didn't have to be a victim in this situation. I could take control, make my own decisions, and protect myself from my son's greed. But as I learned more about David and Michael's financial situations, I began to understand what was really driving their desperation. Jim's investigator discovered that David's investment firm was struggling, had been losing clients for months, and was facing potential regulatory action. Michael had accumulated significant gambling debts and had already borrowed against his 401k retirement account. My sons weren't just greedy. They were desperate. They needed money quickly to solve their own financial crises, and my house represented the fastest solution to their problems. Understanding their motivation didn't excuse their behavior, but it did help me develop a plan. If they wanted to play hardball with their father, I would show them how the game was really played. 3 weeks after that devastating Christmas dinner, I called David's office and left a message with his secretary. "Please tell my son that I've been thinking about our conversation, and I'd like to meet to discuss the details of his proposal. Ask him to arrange a meeting with Michael and that friend Harper who wants to buy my house. I think it's time we got this resolved." David called me back within an hour, his voice noticeably more cheerful than it had been in months. "Dad, I'm so glad you've come to your senses. This really is the best thing for everyone involved. I can set up a meeting for this Friday at my lawyer's office. We can have all the paperwork ready to sign." "That sounds fine, son. I'll be there." What David didn't know was that I would be bringing Jim Patterson with me along with some paperwork of my own. Friday morning arrived cold and gray, typical January weather in Ohio. I put on my best suit, the navy blue one Martha had bought me for David's wedding, and drove downtown to the law offices of Morrison and Associates, the firm David had retained for this transaction. The conference room was impressive, with a long mahogany table and leather chairs that probably cost more than my monthly pension. David and Michael were already seated when I arrived, both looking confident and relaxed. Harper Williams sat beside them, a thin man in an expensive suit who avoided making eye contact with me. Dad, thanks for coming, David said, standing to shake my hand like we were business associates rather than family. I think you'll find that everyone here has your best interests at heart. Jim Patterson entered the room behind me, carrying a briefcase that immediately changed the atmosphere from relaxed confidence to nervous tension. Boys, I'd like you to meet my attorney, Jim Patterson. I thought it would be wise to have legal representation during such an important transaction. David's face went pale. Dad, that's really not necessary. My lawyer can represent both sides since we all want the same outcome. Actually, Jim said, settling into his chair and opening his briefcase, I think you'll find that we have some different objectives here today. For the next 10 minutes, David's lawyer, Robert Morrison, presented their proposal exactly as David had outlined it at Christmas dinner. Sell the house to Harper for $250,000, move me to Sunset Manor, use the proceeds to pay for my care until the money ran out. When Morrison finished his presentation, Jim stood up and began distributing copies of documents he had prepared. Gentlemen, my client has asked me to present some alternative information for your consideration. The first document was a professional appraisal of my house conducted by a certified appraiser Jim had hired. The fair market value was listed as $320,000, $70,000 more than Harper was offering. As you can see, Mr. Williams's offer represents a significant discount from actual market value. We're curious about why Mr. Mitchell should accept such an unfavorable deal. Harper shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Well, the convenience of a cash sale, no inspections, quick closing. Actually, Jim interrupted, we've spoken with 3 other potential buyers who are willing to pay full market value, also with cash, also with quick closing. So the convenience factor doesn't justify a $70,000 reduction. David tried to regain control of the meeting. Dad, you're making this unnecessarily complicated. Harper is a family friend who's trying to help us out. Jim smiled and pulled out another document. That brings us to our next point. We've done some research into the relationship between Harper Williams and David Mitchell. The document detailed David's business relationship with Harper, including their joint investments, and the fact that Harper's investment firm was planning to flip my house for a quick profit. It appears that Mr. Williams isn't trying to help anyone except himself and his business partner, your son David. Michael spoke for the first time since I had entered the room. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Jim replied. I'm stating clearly that this proposed transaction benefits David and Harper at Bob's expense to the tune of approximately $70,000 plus whatever profit they make when they resell the house. Morrison tried to redirect the conversation. Mr. Patterson, your client asked for this meeting to discuss accepting our proposal. If he's changed his mind, we can explore other options, including conservatorship proceedings. Jim's expression hardened. Actually, Mr. Morrison, my client, called this meeting to present his own proposal. He distributed another set of documents, these with my signature already affixed. Bob Mitchell has indeed decided to sell his house, but not to Mr. Williams, and not for the below-market price your clients proposed. David leaned forward, confusion replacing his earlier confidence. What are you talking about? Your father has sold his house to Mrs. Gladys Henderson's nephew, a local contractor who plans to renovate it for his own family. The sale price was $315,000, and the closing occurred yesterday morning. The silence in the room was deafening. David, Michael, and Harper stared at the documents in disbelief. That's impossible, David sputtered. We would have known. We've been monitoring. Monitoring what? Jim asked sharply. Your father's mail, his phone calls, his financial accounts. Because if you've been conducting surveillance on a competent adult without his consent, that's a serious legal issue we need to discuss. Michael's face was bright red. We weren't spying on him. We were just concerned about his welfare. Jim pulled out yet another folder. Your concern is touching, but somewhat inconsistent with your actual motivations. We've conducted our own investigation into your financial situations. The documents he distributed next detailed David's business troubles and Michael's gambling debts information that was apparently news to Harper, who was reading with growing alarm. It appears that your concern for your father's welfare coincidentally aligns with your own desperate need for quick cash to solve your financial problems. David stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Dad, you can't have sold the house without telling us. We're your family. I spoke for the first time since entering the room. David, you told me 3 weeks ago that I was no longer your family, that you had moved past me. I decided to take you at your word. But the money? What about our inheritance? Jim smiled coldly. That brings us to the most interesting part of Mr. Mitchell's new financial plan. He distributed the final set of documents, these outlining the irrevocable trust I had established with the proceeds from the house sale. The money from the house sale, plus Mr. Mitchell's other assets, have been placed in an educational trust for his grandchildren. The funds will be available for college expenses, vocational training, or other educational purposes when the children reach age 18. Michael was scanning the trust documents frantically. What about Dad's care? How is he going to pay for living expenses, medical bills, everything he needs? Mr. Mitchell has moved to Golden Years Community, a much more reasonably priced retirement community where his pension and Social Security will cover all his expenses. He'll have a comfortable apartment, social activities, and medical care available, but at a fraction of the cost of Sunset Manor. And what about us? David asked, his voice hollow with shock. I stood up and looked at both of my sons, these men I had raised and loved and sacrificed everything for, who had repaid that love with greed and betrayal. You'll get your inheritance when I die, just like we always planned. But you'll only receive it if you rebuild your relationship with me and prove that you've learned to value family over money. Harper was gathering his papers, clearly eager to escape a meeting that had gone completely off the rails from his perspective. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I was just trying to help with a family situation. Jim blocked his path to the door. Mr. Williams, before you leave, we need to discuss your role in this attempted financial exploitation of an elderly person. Our investigation has uncovered several similar schemes you and David have attempted with other vulnerable property owners. Harper's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. We have documentation of at least 3 other cases where you've purchased property from elderly owners at below market prices, often with David's assistance in identifying targets. The State Attorney General's office is very interested in patterns of elder financial abuse. David sank back into his chair, the full implications of the situation finally hitting him. Not only had their scheme failed completely, but they were now facing potential criminal investigation. Morrison was shuffling papers nervously. Gentlemen, I think this meeting has accomplished all it can for today. My clients will need time to review these new developments. As everyone prepared to leave, Michael approached me one final time. Dad, I'm sorry. I know we handled this all wrong. Is there any way we can work this out? For just a moment, I saw a flicker of the little boy who used to climb into my lap for bedtime stories. But then I remembered Christmas Eve, remembered the cold calculation in his voice when he threatened me with conservatorship, and I knew that trust, once broken, wasn't easily repaired. Michael, if you want a relationship with me, it starts with respecting me as your father and as an adult human being. It starts with valuing me for more than just what I can give you financially. I do value you, Dad. We both do. Then prove it. Get your life straightened out. Deal with your gambling problem. Learn to live within your means instead of depending on other people's money to solve your problems. I walked toward the door, then turned back to face both sons one final time. And if you ever threaten me with legal action again, if you ever try to have me declared incompetent, if you ever attempt to manipulate or coerce me in any way, you'll find out that your old man is a lot tougher and smarter than you gave him credit for. 6 months have passed since that confrontation in the lawyer's office, and my life has changed in ways I never could have imagined. Golden years. Community turned out to be exactly what I needed, not the prison sentence David and Michael had made Sunset Manor sound like, but a vibrant community of people who valued independence and dignity. My apartment is smaller than my old house, but it's comfortable and filled with Martha's furniture and pictures. I have a small kitchen where I can cook my own meals when I want to, but there's also a dining room where I can eat with friends when I prefer company. There are activities available, but no pressure to participate medical staff on call, but no assumption that I can't manage my own health care. Most surprisingly, I've found companionship I hadn't expected. Evelyn Morrison lives 3 doors down from me, a widow whose husband died 5 years ago. Like me, she had experienced financial manipulation from greedy relatives who saw her as a burden rather than a person. We started having coffee together in the community room, then progressing to dinners and movies in town. Evelyn makes me laugh in ways I hadn't since Martha died. She's smart, independent, and completely uninterested in my money or my property. She likes me for who I am, not for what I can provide. At 68, she's learned that life is too short to waste time with people who don't appreciate you. The situation with my sons has evolved in ways I didn't expect. David, true to his character, has doubled down on his resentment and bitterness. He's had no contact with me since that meeting in January, and according to mutual acquaintances, he's been telling anyone who will listen that his father has lost his mind and fallen under the influence of unscrupulous lawyers. The investigation into David and Harper's real estate schemes resulted in civil penalties and professional sanctions, though no criminal charges were filed. David's investment firm eventually closed, and he's now working for someone else at a fraction of his former income. I don't take pleasure in his struggles, but I can't say I'm surprised by them either. A man who would cheat his own father isn't likely to be honest in his other business dealings. Michael's story has been different and more hopeful. About 2 months after our legal confrontation, he showed up at Golden Years unannounced, looking haggard and ashamed. He had been attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings, had enrolled in financial counseling, and had taken a second job to pay off his debts without borrowing from anyone else. "Dad," he said, sitting across from me in the community room, "I know I can't undo what I did. I know I can't take back the things I said. But I want you to know that I'm getting help, and I'm trying to become the kind of man you raised me to be." It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation scene from a movie. There were no tears, no grand gestures, no immediate forgiveness. But it was a beginning, the first honest conversation we had shared in months. Since then, Michael has been visiting regularly, sometimes bringing his children to see their grandfather. He's been paying back money he owes to other people slowly, but consistently. More importantly, he's been treating me like his father again, not like a financial asset to be managed. The kids, now 8 and 10, love the community center at Golden Years. There's a game room, a library, and a small playground where they can play while Michael and I talk. They don't know the details of what happened between their father and me, but they can sense that their dad is trying to be better, and they're proud of him for it. I've also gotten involved in helping other seniors who face similar situations with greedy relatives. Jim Patterson introduced me to a support group for victims of elder financial abuse, and I've discovered that my story isn't unique. There are dozens of older adults in our area who have been pressured, manipulated, or outright cheated by family members who see inheritance as something they're entitled to immediately, rather than something to be grateful for eventually. I volunteer at the Senior Center twice a week, helping people understand their legal rights and connecting them with resources. It's given me a sense of purpose I hadn't expected to find at this stage of my life. The irrevocable trust I established is growing steadily, invested conservatively but securely. By the time my grandchildren are ready for college, there should be enough money to pay for their education without burdening their parents with debt. It's a legacy I'm proud of, much more meaningful than just leaving cash behind when I die. Most importantly, I've learned that family isn't determined by blood alone. The people who truly care about you, who respect your autonomy and value your well-being over their own convenience, those are your real family. Gladys checks on me regularly, even though she's dealing with her own health challenges. Evelyn includes me in her holiday plans and introduces me to her friends as someone important in her life. Michael is slowly rebuilding trust through consistent actions rather than empty promises. David made his choice when he told me I was no longer family. I've accepted that choice and moved forward without him. It hurts because I remember the little boy who used to help me rake leaves in the fall and build snowmen in the winter. But that little boy grew up to become a man who valued money more than relationships, who saw his father as an obstacle rather than a person deserving of love and respect. Sometimes people ask me if I regret being so hard on my sons, if I wish I had just gone along with their plan to keep peace in the family. The answer is simple. There was no peace in what they were proposing. There was only capitulation to their greed and manipulation. I spent 40 years sacrificing for my children, working extra hours, and taking on debt to give them opportunities I never had. I don't regret those sacrifices because they were made from love. But I refuse to spend my final years being manipulated and controlled by the same children I gave everything to help. At 62, I'm healthier and happier than I've been in years. I have friends who enjoy my company activities that give me purpose and a living situation that respects my independence while providing security. I have one son who is working hard to rebuild our relationship and grandchildren who light up when they see me. Most of all, I have my dignity intact. I didn't allow fear or guilt or misguided loyalty to family to trick me into giving up my autonomy. I fought back when I was attacked, and I won. Martha would be proud of the man I've become since she died. She always said I was stronger than I knew, braver than I felt, and smarter than I gave myself credit for. It took my son's betrayal to prove her right, but she was right about everything else, so why should I be surprised? As I look toward the future, I see possibilities instead of limitations. Maybe Evelyn and I will travel together, visit national parks, or take cruises to places we've always wanted to see. Maybe Michael and I will rebuild a relationship that's even stronger than before, based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Maybe my grandchildren will grow up knowing that their grandfather was a man who stood up for himself when it mattered most. And maybe someday David will realize what he lost when he chose money over family. But even if he doesn't, even if he never reaches out or admits he was wrong, I'll be fine. Because I've learned the most important lesson of my adult life: you teach people how to treat you, and you're never too old to start demanding the respect you deserve. So to anyone watching this who might be facing a similar situation, remember this: your age doesn't make you powerless. Your love for your family doesn't require you to accept their abuse. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the natural consequences of their own choices. Don't let anyone, not even your own children, steal your dignity or your autonomy. Stand up for yourself, get help if you need it, and remember that real family supports and respects each other, especially during difficult times. Have you ever faced a situation where family members tried to take advantage of you financially? How did you handle it? Leave a comment below and share your story. If this video helped you or might help someone you know, please hit the like button and consider sharing it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming challenges and finding strength you didn't know you had. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, it's never too late to take control of your own life and demand the respect you deserve. I hope your holidays are filled with people who truly love and value you, not just for what you can give them, but for who you are.